I'm April Callis-Birchmeier, and welcome to talking about what I wish I had known when I was starting out. So, this is lessons for change managers. And I really love this topic because I feel like so many times we're expected to know things when we're starting our careers or starting a new job or a new role. And it can really be scary sometimes when you feel like, I'm not sure that I know everything. I'm not sure I have everything I need. And so today, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how to start to break through that sensation of not having what you need and figuring out how to get what you need so that you're able to work more effectively and lead change that's successful and leaves everybody adopting the change and feeling as though they are able to work in that new future state. So, as you may or may not know, I'm a change management expert. I love talking about organizational change management. I wrote a book called Ready, Set, Change. And I'm also a project management professional, PMP. I teach for PMI training, and I also teach organizational change management training as an association of change management professional qualified education providers. So I'm excited about that. But let's kind of talk a little bit about some of the challenges that I think happen when you're first beginning, when you're first starting out in your career in organizational change management. I didn't know what change management was when I first was chosen to be in organizational change management. At that time, I had my master's in communication. I was a professor at a couple of community colleges and at Roosevelt University. And I really enjoyed also teaching corporate training. So for companies like Abbott Labs, Ross Labs, I would go and do in-person corporate training for them around things like leadership and how to deal with change. Well, I discovered the world of change management sort of by accident. I felt more like I was discovered by it when I met uh, my first change management leader at an ATD meeting, Association of Training and Development, and we met each other. We were having a great conversation, and she suddenly said to me, "I need you on my project." I was not sure what she was even talking about. I said, "What kind of project are you talking about?" And she said, change management project, a large ERP. Well, one thing led to another, and soon enough, I was a change management lead on this ERP project for Big Ten University. And I was thrilled by this opportunity, very excited about it. But I didn't know very much. I knew communication, I knew how to write um, press releases and documentation. I did a lot of training, so I was good at writing training content, but I didn't know much else. And the very first thing that she wanted me to work on was a change agent network, which I wasn't too sure what that was either. But it ended up that I was supposed to put together a group of people, which didn't seem hard to me until I tried to do it. Now, if you've ever been asked to pull together a group of people, it is a lot more difficult than just reaching out to them through email or phone calls to say, please come to this event because we want you to be in a group. People have to really understand what this group is for and what it's about. And that was my really first big change management challenge, was trying to describe this group to people in a way that made them care and want to be a part of it. And so maybe you've heard my story about how this came to be, and maybe you haven't, but essentially what happened was that I thought about this group nonstop. And we had called them together. We had called together 28 people at first, then we moved up to about 60 people, and then we're moving up to 120 some people. And we were trying to pull this group together. But my leader, who was just a technical genius, was not any better than I was at that point, of describing what it was we were trying to change and what we were doing and why they needed to be involved. But I recognized that the way we were going about it was not effective. We were showing slides of databases. We were talking in technical terms because my boss was a technical genius. She truly was. But we were talking in very technical terms about this. The breakthrough came for this group when I suddenly realized that they needed to understand a story of why we're doing this change. Because I had noticed that when I would tell a story about something that had happened over the weekend or something that was going on in my life, people would listen to that. But when I started talking in a technical way, they weren't so interested. Now, I don't know why it took me so long to figure this out, but it did. And finally, what happened was we had our what was going to be our final meeting if we couldn't pull this group together. And we showed them some technical pictures and we talked to them in a very technical way about what the change was, what an ERP was. And they were bored and they were starting to get up to go. And I thought, oh my gosh, we have to communicate with them in a way that makes sense. And so at that point, I just interrupted our canned presentation and said, hey, have you ever been to Walmart? They just kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? Why are you asking this about Walmart? And I went on to describe a situation that I had been struggling with. I was working full time and I had only Saturdays where I could run errands. And I had these two little daughters, and they were 1 and 3 years old. And I had to put those two girls into their car seats and go to the grocery store, take them out of the car seat, go into the store, get our groceries, come back to the car seats, and put the groceries in the car and go on to the next store, right? We'd have to go on to another place. We'd go to the bank and I'd have to take them out of the car seats and go into the bank and come back out and put them in the car seats again. And then we'd go off to the shoe store. We'd go get some new shoes for these little feet. And we would be there, have to get out of the car seats, into the store, buy what we needed, get back into the car seats, go on to the next trip. And I was very frustrated because I was just spending hours and hours of time going from store to car to car to store with these children in these car seats in a small car where they could touch each other and bother each other. And I was driving home one day really frustrated, and I saw a sign, and it wasn't like a heavenly sign, it was a billboard. I saw a sign that said, come try our super center. And it was for a Walmart. And I had never been to a Walmart. So the next weekend, the next Saturday, I put those girls in their car seats and we drove to that super center. It was kind of a ways away, but it was worth trying. We went to the super center. We got out of our car seats, went into Walmart, and everything we needed was there. All of the groceries that we needed. They had a bank over there at the Walmart. They had a shoe section where we could buy those little shoes. They even had a Subway sandwich shop to keep those girls happy while I was shopping. And I was in and out of this store within an hour and back home enjoying my Saturday. I was so thrilled. And I told this to my change agent group. I said, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build you a student data supercenter, like a Walmart for student data, where you go in one place, get everything you need, and come back out. Because at that time, they were going in and out of all of these different databases constantly. And it was driving them crazy all day long, having to go find data at different places. We want to create it in a place where you can get it and then leave, and it's all easy for you. We love Walmart. That's what they said when they heard this story. Yes, we want that. And so from that point on, we had a very engaged and committed group of individuals who became their change agent group and have actually been in existence for more than 25 years as a group because they understood the story of what it was we were describing. Now, that was something I had to learn. And I'm sharing it with you so that you don't have to learn it. You can just know that when you can share a story with people that they understand, it makes it simpler for them to follow along this change. It's simpler for them to engage with the change, to describe it to others. And for many years, and I think they were still doing it even within the last 2 years, that group, that group that is still in existence, would describe it what they were doing as maintaining their Walmart. So even when we had upgrades to the system, even about a decade ago, when they went to a brand new, different system, they still talked about this idea of having all of the data in one place. Now, that's the example of a relevant, relatable story that I didn't know about, and I fell into it, and I'm glad that I did. But I want to share this with you because I think there's so many myths when you first begin and you're not sure how to describe things. Do I have to say everything in a very technical way? Well, I did try to say things in a very, very technical way, but I discovered that I was not communicating by being so technical. I had to learn to think in a technical way and talk in a relevant and realistic way, in a story, so that people could follow along what we were talking about. So I think that's a big learning for me. I think when you learn these things, you should identify them and kind of write them down somewhere also, so you don't forget them. Because as you go from change event or change project to change project, you sometimes forget these little pieces of information that you've learned. There's other things that I wish I had known when I was starting out. And one of those is that even though I had read Cotter's book about change, and I knew that I was supposed to build a burning platform, an urgency in the organization for my change. Not every change is urgent, and you can't always find a burning platform. So one of the books that I enjoyed very much when I was first starting out in change management was that I read John Cotter's book about organizational change management, and then it might be maybe 25 years ago. Then a book came out that was sort of a simplified version of Cotter's book, and it was called oh wait, I almost called it the wrong name. It's called My Iceberg is Melting, or Iceberg is Melting. And it's a great read, and I would highly recommend it if you're starting out. It's a great read about a penguin colony whose iceberg is melting, and they are trying to rally everyone to let them know that something dramatic is happening and there has to be a change. And so it goes along with Cotter's framework of, create a burning platform, create a sense of urgency in the organization, which in many cases we need, but in some cases, our changes aren't that urgent. And when we try to create an artificial change, when we're trying to create this artificial uh, urgency, if you will, this burning platform, sometimes we can really kind of kick ourselves because it's not as urgent as we're trying to make it. And I think we have to just recognize that as new change management professionals, we don't always have to follow someone else's guidance that we have to build a burning platform. And I learned this the hard way. I was reading a strategic plan, and I had found that in the strategic plan, there was a note about, we were three years away from what was called Y2K, where we were, everybody in the computer world was concerned what would happen at the year 2000, because many computers had been hard coded with 19 as the first two digits of the year. And we're thinking, what's going to happen when we turn to the year 2000 and all of the dates have to go from 19 to 20? And so it was actually something that was of great concern. And there was a lot of effort put forward to fix this issue before the year 2000. I know I remember very dramatic moments when it turned from 1999 to 2000 and the lights all stayed on. We could see the computers had not failed to keep our power on. But I had read that this was part of the reason that we were making a strategic move. And I took this as the great thing I could share with others about being a burning platform. And I said, here's our burning platform. It's Y2K. That's the burning platform. And now we can get everybody all excited. And then my super genius technical boss said, no, we've already fixed all the Y2K issues. It's not going to be your burning platform. Your platform is sort of smoldering. It's not actually burning. So just relax and we'll work through this these piece by piece. I think that there's so many myths when you're first beginning and you're trying to learn everything at once. But one of the things that I like to think about also is just how to gain change management experience. And many times we have change management experience. We may have been doing organizational changes in places that we don't even recognize. Now, I'll tell you when my daughters were young and they were in school, I used to do a lot of organizational change management consulting and work for free at their school. And it was great because I had clients and I had very busy change management career that was at work, but I could also practice things that were not at work. And so the risk was less. So if I wanted to try something really different, really big, or something that seemed unusual, and I just wanted to test it out, I had a great lab in the sense that I was involved with the Parent Teacher Association. I was also involved with helping my principal work with teachers to, adopt new curriculum or adopt changes in our school scheduling, and all of that volunteer work really paid off because I started to have a lot of confidence, a lot of understanding of the pieces that I was doing at work, but then I could see more direct, more immediate results when I would do these things in my volunteer capacities at school and through for other organizations. And so I would recommend that you volunteer to lead a Sunday school Bible camp, because that is a lot of coordination and effort and organizational change. Or even if you could be involved with a group such as, a neighborhood advisory group, and you're able to practice some change management tools or techniques. Maybe you concentrate on identifying stakeholder groups and then thinking about how you can reach out to these different groups. That's a great way to start to build some of those skills and to build some of that experience that everybody's looking for when you're first starting out in your career. I know another piece when I was starting out in my career was that I used to try to follow um, what others were doing, but I would always find areas where it seemed like something could be done a little differently. Maybe something could be a little bit clarified, a little easier to complete. And when I would find those things, I would go ahead and make my own templates and tools and try them. And now sometimes I had very specific tools that I had to use in my role, and I did. I didn't try things out when I wasn't supposed to. But I did find that I was able to really clarify many of our tools while I was working on them, because I would wonder, what if I could put this together in a way that would make the story more clear for everybody that's going through this exercise? And so I remember starting with something called transition workshops, and we had a PowerPoint template that we were supposed to use to lay out, here's what is currently going on, our current state, and here's our future state, and how are we going to adapt as humans, as people, to the new process. And that was the transition workshop, was figuring out the process and what the people had to do differently to adopt this new process. Well, there were a lot of symbols on this PowerPoint deck that we were using. And I thought, if we could just cut it back to like 5 symbols, maybe 6 total, we could really get clear on exactly what was happening when. So we had somehow, over, I'm sure, years, had cluttered up this template to the point where nobody could understand what these symbols meant anymore. You kind of had to have a legend, these icons. You had to have a legend to tell you, like, oh, that means that. And when we cut back to about 6, we had 5 that we used, but we had a 6th kind of hidden symbol for special things. When we cut back, it was so much simpler to be able to describe what people did differently. And once we were able to describe that in a way that people understood, we were so much more successful in these transition workshops. So I just experimented as I was going along. And that's something you can do also when you're starting out your change management career. Just experiment. And, sometimes I have been told, go back and use the template I gave you. And sometimes I've been told, this is a better use of our time. This is a better template. And that's the great beauty of working in organizational change management, is that you can experiment while you are helping and working with organizations. So then eventually I started to, write some articles about things that I was experimenting with. I was working on different types of projects. I liked working on big projects that impacted many people. And those were kind of daunting. But I found that one tool that you might want to use if you're starting out and trying to gain more experience is to really just understand that you can do a pilot of anything. A pilot is a great tool. A pilot is saying we're going to take a small group or a small window of time, something that's experimental, and we're going to try this. The great thing about pilots is it does give you that freedom to be able to experiment, and people don't expect pilots to be perfect. I always do pilot training. And the reason I always do pilot training is because when people are participating in pilot training, they are forgiving. They will watch the training and say, this is great, this is not so great, here's where I got confused, let's fix this. And you have this sort of collaborative, cooperative conversation. When you say, here's the training, and there's no pilot involved, sometimes it's a much harsher conversation. And so I like to start all of my training with pilot training so that I can see and have the benefit of everyone's opinion and ideas rather than having sort of this expectation that this will be perfect as delivered, because nothing is perfect as delivered. We always are iterating and making things better because we are going for progress, not perfection. So when I'm positioning myself as a training leader in my change management roles, I definitely want to use a pilot training session. And it really helps build my credibility when I can listen to the feedback and incorporate that feedback into the training in a way that people can see it and makes it better, because that's my goal, is to make it better. I also had to learn starting out that no matter what I did, I could not make everybody happy as a change management professional. And I really hate that. I love to make everyone happy. It really bothers me that I can't get everybody 100% on board with the change, but I do understand that I can't. And I think that recognition is important because it gives me a little bit of freedom to not take everything personally. I think you can burn out very quickly as a change management professional if you always consider people's opinions about a change or the way that it's rolled out to be about you. And you can burn out and feel pretty deflated because change is difficult. And you're asking people to go through not only behavior changes, but we're asking people to change the way they think, mindset shifts. And those mindset shifts are difficult to incorporate if we don't have um, if we don't have a sense of being protected by we're not to blame for every change, right? And many years I thought I thought it was my job to sort of be the person to take all the complaints and try to fix everything. And I can't fix everything. I have to sometimes recognize that there will be people who will leave organizations because of change, and it's not my fault. And there will be people who are thrilled with organizations because we went through a change, and that's not to my credit either. I'm just helping work through the process so that people can adopt that change. I think another piece is to really connect with other change management professionals. It can be a lonely business. Sometimes there's only one of us on a project or one in a whole department. And so connecting with others, like through the Association of Change Management Professionals, ACMP, has a connect section on their website where people write to each other all day long. And also attending webinars and other events where you can connect with change management practitioners, and joining a chapter. I'm the founding president of the Michigan chapter. And though I'm no longer the president of the chapter, I am always excited to connect with people in the chapter because it gives us the opportunity to talk about some of the experiences and wins that we've had, the challenges that we've had, and some of the learning that we've had as we're going along and discovering things together. So I enjoy that very much. And I also think you should try to know who to trust, if that makes sense. Um, I generally want to work with sponsors that I trust, but sometimes sponsors are not the most trustworthy. And I think we just have to recognize that as change management professionals. Sometimes sponsors have other motives that we are not aware of. And even when we're asking that sponsor to commit to this change and we're providing some opportunities for the sponsor to really get active and visible and lead this change, the sponsor still has their own agenda that we don't always know about. And so I think we don't have to give up our own agency for the sponsor. We have to help the sponsor, but if that sponsor shows that they don't want to work with us or work with anybody on on helping their stakeholders change, then we have to accept that behavior. That's just how it is sometimes. And that's something that I had to learn. That's a lesson I learned the hard way. But if you are interested in learning more about organizational change management, I would love to have you in our Ready, Set, Change accelerated training and exam prep. It begins on Monday and it runs for 3 weeks. We start on February 24th. We end on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. So go out for your green beer to celebrate. And we have 2 live online sessions a week. We have some pre-recorded sessions during the week, and it's 21 hours of qualified education provider training in the Ready, Set, Change framework and in the Standard for Change Management, which prepares you to take and pass your CCMP. So we've had about 120 students pass their CCMPs in the last couple of years. We're really proud of our students and of our record, and we would love to have you join us. And so if you are looking to learn more about organizational change management, if you'd like to expand your frame of reference in terms of all of the things that you can do as a change management professional and to build a community of other change management professionals, please consider joining us. I'd love to have you. with us. And, you're welcome to send me an email at april@springboard-consult.com. You can reach out to me. I'd be happy to have a phone call or conversation. But I wanted to share some of my lessons learned that I had to um, go through, recognize, and really take to heart, so that I was able to build my experience and able to help others along the way from that experience.